Jake Morrison never expected his routine patrol to end like this. He was flying near the edge of known space, checking navigation beacons and making sure everything was working properly. It was supposed to be a boring job, the kind where nothing ever happened. But today was different. His fighter's control panel started flashing red warnings. Something was wrong with the engines. Before Jake could even react, his entire ship went dark. The power died instantly and his fighter began drifting through space like a dead leaf on water. He tried the backup systems, the emergency power, even the manual controls. Nothing worked. Then he saw them. 3 large ships appeared out of nowhere, surrounding his helpless fighter. They were unlike anything in the Earth Defense Force database. The ships had a strange organic look to them, covered in dark green scales that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. Jake's heart sank as a bright beam of light locked onto his fighter and pulled it toward the largest ship. The aliens who captured him were called the Zathrin. Jake learned this when they dragged him from his fighter and threw him into a holding cell. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with reptilian features and cold yellow eyes that looked at him like he was nothing more than an interesting insect. Their skin was covered in small green and brown scales, and when they spoke, their voices hissed like snakes. Commander Varix was the leader of this ship. He walked up to Jake's cell with a cruel smile on his face. His scales were darker than the others, almost black, and he wore some kind of ceremonial armor that marked him as important. "A human," Varix said, his voice dripping with amusement. "We have heard stories about your kind. They say humans are weak, soft creatures who cannot survive real combat. Today we will test this." Jake stood up and faced Varix through the bars. "I'm a member of the Earth Defense Force. You're holding me prisoner illegally. The Coalition will come looking for me." Varix laughed, a horrible sound that made Jake's skin crawl. "Let them come. By the time they arrive, you will be dead. But you will die entertainingly, human. You should feel honored. We have a special creature for you to face." 2 guards grabbed Jake and pulled him from the cell. They dragged him through long corridors filled with other cells. Inside those cells, Jake saw creatures from dozens of different species. Some were huddled in corners, terrified. Others pressed against the bars, crying out in languages Jake didn't understand. This wasn't just a prison ship. It was something far worse. They brought Jake to a large room beneath what he realized was an arena. He could hear the sounds of a massive crowd above, thousands of voices chattering in the Zathrin language. The room where they put him was dark and cold. The floor was covered in stains that Jake tried not to think about. The smell was terrible, a mix of dried blood and fear. "You will wait here," one of the guards said. "When the gate opens, you will enter the arena. Fight well, human. Make the crowd happy, and perhaps your death will be quick." They left him alone in the darkness. Jake explored the small space, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. There was nothing. Just bare walls, the stained floor, and a small drain in the corner. He was wearing his flight suit but had no tools, no weapons, nothing that could help him survive whatever was coming. Then he heard it. A sound from the cell next to his, separated only by a large metal gate. It was a deep, rumbling growl that made the walls vibrate. Whatever was in there was big, very big. Jake moved closer to the gate, trying to see through the small gaps in the metal. 2 massive yellow eyes appeared in the darkness on the other side. They glowed with an intelligence that was almost human. But there was something wild in them, something dangerous. The creature moved, and Jake caught glimpses of black scales, claws as long as his hand, and teeth that could easily tear him apart. Above him, the crowd's noise grew louder. They were chanting something in their language, getting excited. Jake's mouth went dry. This was really happening. They were going to make him fight this creature for their entertainment. He thought about his home on Earth, the ranch in Montana where he grew up. He thought about his mother and his younger brother, about the last time he saw them before shipping out on this mission. He thought about his dog Max, an old golden retriever who always waited by the door for him to come home. Would Max keep waiting? Would his family ever know what happened to him? The gate between his cell and the creature's cell began to move. Motors whined and gears ground as the heavy metal slowly lifted upward. The crowd above went wild with excitement. Their cheering was so loud it hurt Jake's ears. Jake pressed himself against the far wall, his mind racing. He had no weapons. He had no armor. He couldn't outrun this thing in a closed space. Every combat training course he had ever taken ran through his mind, but none of them covered fighting a giant monster with your bare hands. The gate was halfway up now. Jake could see the creature more clearly. It was massive, at least 12 feet tall, with a body built like a prehistoric predator. Its scales were pure black and seemed to absorb the light. Its claws scraped against the floor as it moved, leaving deep scratches in the metal. The muscles beneath its scales rippled with power. But then Jake noticed something else. Scars. The creature was covered in old scars, some small, some large. These weren't the scars of a wild animal. These were the scars of a creature that had been forced to fight over and over again. This thing wasn't a natural killer. It had been made into one. The gate reached the top and locked into place with a loud clang. The creature stepped through into Jake's cell, moving slowly, carefully. It was watching him, studying him, trying to figure out what kind of opponent he would be. The crowd above screamed for blood. Jake made a decision in that moment. It was crazy, probably suicidal, but it was the only thing he could think of. He slowly sat down on the cold floor. He crossed his legs and placed his hands on his knees. Then he looked up at the creature and waited. The creature stopped, confused. This was not how prey was supposed to act. The creature towered over Jake, its massive head tilted to one side. Every muscle in its body was tense, ready to attack. But it didn't move. The crowd above was screaming, demanding action, demanding blood. Still, the creature just stood there, watching this strange, small being who refused to run or fight. Jake kept his breathing slow and steady, even though his heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. He had grown up around animals, spent his whole childhood on a ranch. His father had taught him that animals could sense fear, could smell it on you. The more afraid you acted, the more dangerous they became. "Easy," Jake said softly. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the quiet of the cell beneath the roaring crowd, the creature could hear him. "I'm not going to hurt you. I know you've been hurt enough." The creature took a step forward. Its claws clicked on the metal floor. Jake forced himself to stay still, to not flinch, to not show fear. He kept his eyes on the creature but didn't stare directly into its eyes. Direct eye contact was a challenge in the animal world, and Jake didn't want to challenge this thing. "That's right," Jake continued in his soft voice. "I'm not like them. I'm not going to make you fight. Another step." The creature was close now, close enough that Jake could feel the heat radiating from its body. He could smell it too, a wild animal smell mixed with old blood and something else. Something that reminded him of the rescue animals he used to help back home. It was the smell of pain and suffering. Above them, Commander Varix was shouting orders. The crowd was getting restless. This wasn't what they paid to see. They wanted violence, wanted to see the small human torn apart by their champion fighter. Some in the crowd started throwing things down into the cell, pieces of garbage and food, trying to provoke the creature into attacking. The creature's head swung up toward the noise and a deep growl rumbled from its chest. Its lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. But the growl wasn't directed at Jake. It was directed at the crowd, at the Zathran who were shouting and throwing things. "They're the enemy," Jake said quietly. "Not me. They're the ones who hurt you, who made you fight, who kept you locked up in the dark. I'm just like you. A prisoner." The creature looked back down at Jake. For a long moment they stayed like that, human and monster, just looking at each other. Then slowly the creature lowered its massive head. Its nose, or whatever passed for a nose, moved closer to Jake. It was sniffing him, trying to figure out what he was. Jake remained perfectly still. The creature's breath was hot on his face and he could see his own reflection in those huge yellow eyes. His hands wanted to shake, his body wanted to run, but he controlled it all. He thought about his dog Max, about the first time they met. Max had been a rescue, abused and scared of people. Jake had sat with him for hours, not moving, just being present, until Max finally trusted him enough to come close. "You're scared too," Jake whispered. "I can see it. Under all that anger and all those teeth, you're just scared." The creature made a sound, something between a growl and a whine. It was a sound of confusion, maybe even frustration. Nothing about this situation made sense to it. Every other creature they had thrown in this cell had either attacked or tried to run. This small human was doing neither. Hours passed. The crowd eventually started to leave, disappointed by the lack of violence. Commander Varix stayed longer, shouting down at Jake, threatening him, promising worse things to come. But eventually even he left. The arena lights dimmed as night cycle began on the ship. Jake was exhausted. His legs were cramping from sitting in one position for so long. His back hurt. His throat was dry from talking softly for hours. But he didn't move. The creature had settled down on the floor about 10 feet away, still watching him, still trying to figure him out. I need to sleep, Jake said to the creature. I'm so tired I can barely think straight. But I'm afraid if I close my eyes, you'll kill me. That's what they want, isn't it? They want you to kill me. The creature's eyes blinked slowly. In the dim light, Jake could see more details now. The scars covered almost every part of its body. Some were old, faded to pale lines against the black scales. Others were newer, still raw and angry looking. This creature had been fighting for a long time. Jake made a decision. If he was going to die, he'd rather die in his sleep than stay awake in fear. He slowly laid down on his side, still facing the creature. He used his arm as a pillow and closed his eyes. "Good night," he whispered. "If you're going to kill me, please make it quick." He waited for the end. He waited for the pain of claws or teeth, but nothing happened. Minutes passed, then an hour. Jake's exhausted body started to relax despite his fear. Sleep began to creep over him. When he woke up later, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. The cell was still dark, lit only by a small emergency light in the corner. Jake's heart jumped when he realized something had changed. The creature had moved. It was no longer 10 feet away. It was right next to him, lying down on the floor just like Jake was. They were close enough that Jake could have reached out and touched it. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature's eyes were open, watching him. But there was something different in those eyes now. The wild, dangerous look had softened. The creature looked tired, so very tired. "You didn't kill me," Jake said softly. "You could have while I was sleeping, but you didn't." The creature blinked slowly, like it was acknowledging his words. Jake slowly sat up, moving carefully so he wouldn't startle it. The creature's eyes followed his movement, but it didn't tense up or growl. It just watched. Jake looked at the massive creature lying beside him. Up close, he could see how magnificent it was. The black scales were beautiful, each one perfect despite the scars. The muscles beneath were powerful, built for speed and strength. This wasn't a monster. This was an apex predator, something that deserved respect. "They call you a monster," Jake said. "But you're not, are you? You're just an animal that wants to be left alone. They took you from your home, didn't they? Forced you to fight, made you into something you're not." The creature made that sound again, the one between a growl and a whine. It was a sad sound, lonely and full of pain. Jake slowly extended his hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. It was a gesture of peace, of offering friendship. His hand shook slightly and he couldn't stop it. Fear was still there, primal and strong, but so was something else, compassion. "My name is Jake," he said softly. "I know you probably can't understand me, but I want you to know I see you. Not a monster. Not a weapon. Just you." The creature stared at Jake's extended hand for what felt like forever. Jake kept his hand steady even though every instinct screamed at him to pull it back. He had seen documentary videos about this moment. The moment when a wild animal decides whether to trust or attack. Everything depended on patience. The creature's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air around Jake's hand. It was gathering information, trying to understand what this gesture meant. Slowly, so slowly that Jake almost didn't notice at first, the creature began to move its head forward. Jake held his breath. The massive head came closer and closer to his hand. He could see every detail of the creature's face now. The scales around its eyes were smaller, more delicate. There were tiny scars even there, evidence of countless fights. The creature's eyes, those huge yellow eyes, were watching Jake's face as much as his hand. Then contact. The creature's snout touched Jake's palm. The scales were warm and rough, like touching sun-heated stone. Jake didn't move, didn't react, just let the creature investigate. It sniffed his hand, his wrist, moving its head slowly to gather as much information as possible. After a few moments, something amazing happened. The creature moved closer, bringing its head near Jake's chest. It sniffed his flight suit, his neck, even his hair. Jake sat frozen, barely breathing as this massive predator examined him with the curiosity of a dog meeting a new friend. "That's right," Jake whispered, when the creature pulled back slightly. "I'm not dangerous." "Well, not to you anyway." Then Jake heard it. A sound so unexpected that at first he thought he was imagining it. It was coming from deep in the creature's chest, a rumbling vibration that filled the whole cell. It took Jake a moment to realize what it was. The creature was purring. It wasn't like a cat's purr. It was much deeper, more powerful, something you could feel in your bones. But it was definitely a purr, a sound of contentment, maybe even happiness. The creature's eyes closed halfway and its whole body seemed to relax. Jake couldn't help but smile. "You like that, don't you?" Someone finally being nice to you. Very slowly, Jake moved his hand to the top of the creature's head. He half expected it to snap at him to bite his hand off, but it didn't. The creature leaned into his touch, that deep purr growing even louder. Jake gently stroked the creature's head. The scales felt strange under his fingers, but not unpleasant. He found a spot behind what might have been ears, and when he scratched there, the creature made a pleased rumbling sound and pushed harder against his hand. "You're just a big puppy, aren't you?" Jake said with a tired laugh. "A very large, very dangerous puppy, but still." The creature opened its eyes and looked at Jake. There was something different in that gaze now. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. What remained was something that looked almost like gratitude. "I'm going to call you Rex," Jake said. "Is that okay?" "You look like a Rex." Rex made a soft chuffing sound and settled his massive head on Jake's lap. The weight was enormous, and Jake's legs immediately started going numb. But he didn't care. He kept petting Rex's head, scratching behind those ear-like structures and talking softly about anything and everything. He told Rex about Earth, about the mountains of Montana where he grew up. He described the ranch, the horses and cattle, the wide-open spaces under blue skies. He talked about his family, about Max the golden retriever who loved to swim in the creek behind their house. Rex listened to it all, his eyes half closed, that deep purr never stopping. Sometimes he would make small sounds, little rumbles and chuffs that seemed like responses. Jake didn't know if Rex understood the words, but he was certain the creature understood the tone, the emotion behind the words. Hours passed like this. Above them, the arena ship traveled through space, but in this cell, time seemed to stop. It was just a man and a creature, two prisoners finding comfort in each other's company. Jake dozed off a few times, exhaustion taking over. Each time he woke up, Rex was still there, still resting his head on Jake's lap, still purring. At some point during the night, Jake fell into a deeper sleep, his hand still resting on Rex's head. When Jake woke up for real, he could tell it was morning by the change in the ship's ambient lighting. The cell was slightly brighter now. His whole body was stiff from sleeping on the hard floor, and his legs were completely numb from Rex's weight. "Rex," Jake said softly, "I need to move, buddy. My legs are dead." Rex lifted his head and moved back, giving Jake space to stand up. Jake groaned as feeling came back to his legs in painful waves of pins and needles. He hobbled around the small cell trying to get his blood flowing again. Rex watched him with those intelligent eyes, his head tilted slightly. When Jake stumbled from the numbness, Rex quickly moved to steady him, letting Jake lean against his solid shoulder. "Thanks, buddy," Jake said, patting Rex's side. "You're a good friend." Above them, sounds started echoing through the ship. Voices, footsteps, the general noise of the arena coming back to life for a new day. Jake knew what was coming. The Zathrene would return, would see that he survived the night, and would probably be very surprised. "Whatever happens next," Jake said to Rex, "we face it together, okay? You're not alone anymore. And neither am I." Rex made a rumbling sound that seemed like agreement. He pressed against Jake's side, and Jake wrapped an arm around the creature's massive neck. They didn't have to wait long. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the cell. Multiple sets of footsteps, lots of them. Voices speaking in the hissing Zathrene language grew louder as they approached. Then the corridor lights came on, bright and harsh. Jake squinted against the sudden glare. He heard gasps, shocked exclamations, the sound of weapons being drawn. Through the bars of the cell, Jake could see a crowd of Zathrene guards and arena workers, all staring with their mouths hanging open. Commander Varix pushed through the crowd, his dark scales gleaming in the light. His yellow eyes went wide when he saw Jake standing there, very much alive, with Rex sitting calmly beside him like an oversized guard dog. "Impossible," Varix hissed. "The human should be dead. The Vorax kills everything. It has never shown mercy, never hesitated." "What is this?" Jake looked Varix straight in the eye. "This is what happens when you treat a living being with respect instead of cruelty. Rex here isn't a monster. You made him act like one." At the sound of Jake's voice, Rex moved to stand between Jake and the bars, placing his body as a shield. A low warning growl rumbled from his chest, and his lips pulled back to show all those deadly teeth. The Zathrene guards stumbled backward, raising their weapons. "Rex, easy," Jake said, placing a hand on the creature's shoulder. "They're not worth it." Rex stopped growling, but didn't move from his protective position. Commander Varric stared at the scene before him, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. The Vorax, his most prized fighter, the creature that had killed dozens of opponents without hesitation, was standing there like a tame pet, and worse, it was protecting the human. "This cannot be," Varric said, his voice shaking with anger. "The Vorax is a killing machine. It knows nothing but violence. You have done something to it, used some kind of human trick or technology." Jake laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Technology, look at me. I have nothing. No weapons, no tools, not even a communicator. All I did was show this creature a little kindness. Something you clearly know nothing about." One of the guards, a younger Zathrin with bright green scales, stepped forward cautiously. "Commander, the entire ship is talking about this. Everyone wants to see the human who tamed the Vorax. The arena owners are very interested." Varric's eyes narrowed. Jake could see the wheels turning in the commander's head. The Zathrin were cruel, but they were also practical. They saw everything in terms of profit and entertainment. A human who could control their most dangerous fighter was valuable. "Bring them food," Varric ordered. "And water. I want the human kept alive and healthy." "What about the Vorax?" the guard asked. "It too. If the human dies, the Vorax will return to its old self and we lose this opportunity." Varric turned his cold gaze back to Jake. "You have bought yourself some time, human. But do not think this changes anything. You are still a prisoner. The Vorax is still our property. And eventually we will find a way to profit from this situation." The guards brought food and water, sliding it through a small opening at the base of the cell bars. They moved nervously, keeping a careful distance from Rex, who watched them with suspicious eyes. Jake noticed that the food they brought was better than what he'd seen given to the other prisoners. There was actual meat, some kind of grain, and clean water. Jake shared the food with Rex, who ate carefully, taking small pieces from Jake's hand. It was clear that Rex had never been fed gently before. He was used to food being thrown at him, to having to fight for every meal. "Slow down, buddy," Jake said when Rex tried to gulp down a large piece of meat. "No one's going to take it from you. There's plenty." Over the next few days, the routine continued. Guards brought food and water twice a day. Varric came by regularly, always watching, always thinking. Jake could see the commander was planning something, but he didn't know what. During this time, Jake worked with Rex. He taught the creature simple commands, using hand signals along with words. "Sit. Stay. Come." Rex learned quickly, proving that his intelligence was far greater than the Zathrin had given him credit for. He wasn't just a mindless killer. He was smart, capable of learning and understanding. Jake also played with Rex as much as they could in the small cell. He would pretend to hide behind his hands, then pop out, making Rex's eyes light up with what Jake swore was amusement. He threw small pieces of their bedding for Rex to catch. Simple games, but they brought out a side of Rex that had probably been buried for years. The sound of Rex's purring became a constant companion. Whenever Jake sat down, Rex would settle beside him, that deep rumble filling the cell. At night, they slept side by side, Rex's body providing warmth in the cold cell. Word of the human and his tamed Vorax spread beyond the arena ship. Other Zathrin vessels heard the story. It became a legend, something people had to see to believe. The arena started getting requests from wealthy Zathrin who wanted to witness this impossible bond. Commander Varric saw his opportunity. He announced a special exhibition. Crowds would pay premium prices to see the human and the Vorax together. It wasn't the violent spectacle they had planned, but it was something even more rare, and therefore more valuable. Jake hated being put on display like an animal in a zoo, but he endured it. During these exhibitions, he would show the crowd what Rex could do. Rex would follow commands, would let Jake ride on his back as they moved around the arena, would even do tricks. The crowds were amazed, but Jake could see the disgust in their eyes too. They didn't like that a human could do something they couldn't. After one particularly long exhibition, Jake and Rex were returned to their cell. Jake was exhausted, his voice hoarse from talking to the crowd. He collapsed against the wall, and Rex immediately curled up beside him. "I'm sorry, Rex," Jake said quietly. "I know you hate this as much as I do, being stared at, being treated like entertainment, but I promise you we're going to get out of here somehow." Rex made a soft sound and rested his head on Jake's leg. In the creature's eyes, Jake could see trust, complete and absolute. Rex believed in him. That trust was both comforting and terrifying. Jake didn't know how he was going to keep that promise. Days turned into weeks. Jake lost track of exactly how long they had been prisoners. The routine of food, exhibitions, and sleep blurred together. But through it all, the bond between Jake and Rex grew stronger. They could communicate now with just looks and gestures. Rex understood Jake's moods, could tell when he was sad or angry or afraid. And Jake understood Rex, could read the creature's body language, knew what every sound and movement meant. One night, Jake was awakened by Rex's low growling. The creature was standing at the cell bars, staring into the darkness of the corridor. His whole body was tense, alert. "What is it, buddy?" Jake asked, moving to stand beside Rex. Then he heard it too. Voices, but not the usual Zathran hissing. These voices were different, speaking in a language that made Jake's heart leap with hope. They were speaking English. Footsteps rushed through the corridor, and suddenly the area outside their cell was filled with light. But it wasn't the harsh arena lights. These were the bright white lights of Earth Defense Force helmets. Soldiers in dark combat armor were sweeping through the prison level, weapons raised, checking every cell. One of the soldiers stopped at Jake's cell, and his eyes went wide behind his helmet visor. "Commander, I found him." "I found Lieutenant Morrison." More soldiers rushed over. A woman stepped forward, removing her helmet. She had short brown hair and the insignia of a captain on her armor. Her face showed both relief and concern. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said, "I'm Captain Lisa Hayes. We've been searching for you for 3 weeks. Are you injured?" Jake felt tears stinging his eyes. "Rescue. They had actually come for him." "I'm okay, Captain, but I'm not leaving without Rex." Captain Hayes looked at the massive creature standing beside Jake. Her hand instinctively moved toward her weapon, but she didn't draw it. "That's a Vorax, one of the most dangerous predators known." "Morrison, step away from it slowly." "No," Jake said firmly. He placed his hand on Rex's head, and the creature leaned into his touch, purring. "Rex is coming with me, or I'm staying here." Captain Hayes stared at Jake like he had lost his mind. Behind her, the other soldiers kept their weapons trained on Rex, fingers hovering over triggers. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Morrison, that thing is a Vorax," Captain Hayes said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "According to our database, they're classified as extremely dangerous. Multiple coalition species have banned them from civilian space. You're asking me to bring that onto my ship?" "Yes, Captain, I am," Jake said firmly. "Rex isn't dangerous unless you make him dangerous. The Zathrene tortured him, forced him to fight. He's been living in fear and pain for years. I'm not abandoning him." Rex sensed the tension in the air. He pressed closer to Jake, his body positioning itself as a shield. A low rumble came from his chest, not quite a growl, but definitely a warning. The soldiers tensed, and Jake heard several weapons click as safeties were turned off. "Stand down," Jake said to the soldiers. Then he looked at Rex and placed both hands on the creature's face. "Rex, it's okay. These are friends. They're here to help us." Rex looked into Jake's eyes for a long moment, then slowly relaxed. The rumbling stopped, and he sat down, though he stayed close to Jake. Captain Hayes watched this interaction with growing amazement. She had seen a lot in her 15 years with the Earth Defense Force, but nothing quite like this. She tapped her communicator. "Hayes to Valiant. I need a direct line to Admiral Cooper now." There was a pause, then an older man's voice came through. "This is Cooper. What's your situation, Captain?"
"Sir, we found Morrison."
"He's alive and unharmed, but we have a complication. He's bonded with a Vorax and refuses to leave without it." "A Vorax? The predator species?" "Yes, sir. And Admiral, I'm watching this creature take commands from him like a trained dog. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen." There was a long silence on the other end. Jake could hear muffled voices in the background, probably the Admiral consulting with others. Finally, Admiral Cooper came back on the line. "Captain, the Coalition Council has strict regulations about transporting dangerous species. If that Vorax so much as harms one person, it will be destroyed immediately and you'll face a court-martial. Can you accept that responsibility?" Captain Hayes looked at Jake, then at Rex, then back at Jake. She saw something in Jake's eyes, a certainty, a bond that reminded her of handlers with their service animals back on Earth. Against her better judgment, she made her decision. "Yes, sir. I accept full responsibility. Then get them both back to the ship. But Hayes? That creature stays in containment until we can figure out what to do with it." "Understood, Admiral." "Hayes out." She looked at Jake. "You heard him. The Vorax goes into a containment cell on the ship." "That's fine," Jake said. "As long as I can stay with him." Morrison, you need medical attention. You need to be debriefed. You can't just camp out in a containment cell. Captain, with all due respect, I've been living in a cell for weeks. A few more days won't kill me, but separating Rex from the only person he trusts might cause serious problems. Captain Hayes rubbed her face, feeling a headache coming on. Fine, but you report to medical first. Get checked out, get cleaned up, eat some real food. Then you can return to your pet monster. He's not a monster, Jake said quietly. He's my friend. The soldiers opened Jake's cell, moving carefully around Rex. Jake spoke softly to Rex the whole time, explaining what was happening. When they started moving through the prison level toward the ship, Rex stayed right at Jake's side, matching his pace perfectly. They passed other cells filled with prisoners of various species. When those prisoners saw the Vorax walking calmly beside Jake, they pressed against their cell bars in amazement. Some called out in languages Jake didn't understand, but the tone was clear. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Commander Varix appeared as they reached the exit to the prison level. His face was twisted with rage. You cannot take the Vorax. It is property of the arena. You have no right. Captain Hayes didn't even slow down. We have every right. You're holding an Earth Defense Force officer prisoner. You've been using sentient beings for entertainment, which violates at least 6 coalition laws. Be grateful we're only taking our pilot and this one creature. We could shut down your entire operation. The coalition will hear about this, Varric shouted after them. I'm counting on it, Captain Hayes called back. They boarded the shuttle that would take them to the Valiant. Rex had to duck to fit through the door, and even then his bulk filled nearly half the passenger compartment. The soldiers eyed him nervously, but Rex just settled on the floor next to Jake's seat and closed his eyes. During the short flight to the Valiant, Jake looked out the viewport at the Zathran arena ship growing smaller behind them. He thought about all the other prisoners still trapped there, all the other creatures forced to fight. It made him angry, but he was also realistic. They couldn't save everyone today, but maybe, just maybe, getting Rex out was a start. The Valiant was a mid-sized cruiser, built for long-range patrols and combat support. When the shuttle docked and the doors opened, there was already a crowd of crew members waiting to see the human and the Vorax. Word had spread fast through the ship. Medical staff tried to take Jake immediately to the sick bay, but he refused to go until Rex was settled. They compromised by doing a quick examination right there in the docking bay while Rex waited nearby. The doctor, an older woman named Dr. Patricia Green, declared Jake was physically fine, just underfed and exhausted. You're lucky, Dr. Green said. A few more weeks in those conditions and we'd be having a different conversation. They led Jake and Rex to a large containment room near the cargo bay. It was meant to hold dangerous materials during transport, but it was the only space on the ship big enough for Rex. The room was stark and bare, with reinforced walls and a single door that locked from the outside. It's not much, Captain Hayes said apologetically, but it's the best we can do on short notice. It's better than the arena cell, Jake said. At least it's clean. They brought bedding, food, and water. Jake was given a change of clothes and access to a small bathroom attached to the containment room. Captain Hayes assigned a guard to stay outside the door at all times, more to keep curious crew members away than to keep Rex contained. That first night on the Valiant, Jake lay on a real mattress for the first time in weeks. Rex was curled up on the floor beside him, purring contentedly. They were safe. They were together. And they were finally free from the arena. But Jake knew their troubles weren't over. The coalition would have questions. There would be hearings, evaluations, probably a mountain of paperwork. And the biggest question of all remained unanswered. What would happen to Rex? Jake reached down and scratched behind Rex's ears. The creature made a happy sound and pushed into his hand. We'll figure it out, buddy, Jake whispered. I promised I wouldn't abandon you, and I meant it. The next few days on the Valiant were busy. Jake spent hours being debriefed by Captain Hayes and her officers, telling them everything about his capture, the arena, and how he befriended Rex. He also underwent medical tests, psychological evaluations, and endless interviews with various coalition representatives who contacted the ship. Through it all, Jake insisted on returning to Rex whenever possible. The crew noticed that the longer Jake was away, the more agitated Rex became. He would pace the containment room, making worried sounds. But the moment Jake returned, Rex would settle down immediately, his deep purr echoing through the corridors. Dr. Green found this fascinating from a behavioral standpoint. I've studied interspecies bonding for 20 years, she told Jake during one of their conversations. But I've never seen anything like this. That Vorax is completely devoted to you. It's mutual, Jake replied, scratching Rex's head. He saved my life just as much as I saved his. The real challenge came when they arrived at Gateway Station, a massive coalition hub in neutral space. This was where Jake's fate, and more importantly Rex's fate, would be decided. The station was home to representatives from hundreds of species, including several who had lost people to Vorax attacks in the past. Admiral Cooper met them at the docking bay. He was a tall man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent his entire life in space. His eyes were kind but serious as he shook Jake's hand. "Lieutenant Morrison," the Admiral said, "you've caused quite a stir across the coalition. The Council wants to meet you and your companion." "Rex isn't just a companion, sir," Jake said carefully. "He's intelligent, capable of learning, and only dangerous when threatened. The stories about Vorax being mindless killers are wrong. That's what you'll need to convince the Council of," Admiral Cooper replied. "And I'll be honest with you, son. Many of them want the Vorax destroyed. They see it as too dangerous to allow it to live regardless of your bond with it." Jake felt his blood run cold. They can't do that. Rex hasn't hurt anyone since we've been together. He only killed in the arena because he was forced to. I know. But fear is a powerful thing, and the Vorax have a reputation. You'll need to make your case and make it well. The Council meeting was held in a huge circular chamber at the heart of Gateway Station. Representatives from dozens of species sat in rising tiers around the center floor. Jake stood in the middle with Rex beside him, feeling like a defendant in a trial. The Council leader, a wise-looking alien from a species Jake didn't recognize, spoke first. "Lieutenant Morrison, you stand before this Council with a creature classified as extremely dangerous. Several members have called for its immediate termination. What do you say to this?" Jake took a deep breath. "With respect, this Council is wrong about the Vorax, or at least about this one. Yes, Rex is powerful. Yes, he could be dangerous. But so could any of us if we were tortured and forced to fight for survival. Rex isn't a mindless killer. He's intelligent, loyal, and capable of great gentleness. You ask us to believe this based on your word alone?" Another Council member challenged. "No," Jake said. "I ask you to judge him based on his actions. Since leaving the arena ship, Rex has been around dozens of people. He's been on a military vessel with crew members. He's been in stressful situations. And not once has he shown aggression toward anyone who wasn't threatening him or me first." A third Council member stood up. She was from a species that had suffered Vorax attacks. "My people have lost hundreds to Vorax raids. These creatures are monsters. How do we know this one won't revert to its true nature?" Jake felt Rex tense beside him. The creature could sense the hostility in the room. Jake placed a calming hand on Rex's shoulder. "Because I know him. I've spent weeks with him, living beside him, sleeping next to him when he could have killed me 1,000 times over. He chose not to. He chose kindness. He chose friendship. That's not the action of a monster. That's the action of a thinking, feeling being who deserves a chance." The Council chambers erupted in debate. Some members argued passionately for Rex's destruction. Others were moved by Jake's words and wanted to study this unusual bond. The argument went on for hours. Finally, the Council leader called for order. "We will take a vote. But first, I have a question for Lieutenant Morrison. If we allow the Vorax to live, what would you propose we do with it? It cannot simply be released into the wild." Jake had been thinking about this for days. "Rex stays with me. I'll take full responsibility for him. I'll train him, care for him, and ensure he never poses a threat to anyone. The Earth Defense Force has service animals, therapy animals, even animals that assist in search and rescue. Rex could be the first of a new program, showing that even the most feared species can be understood and worked with." "You would dedicate your life to this creature?" the Council leader asked. "Yes," Jake said without hesitation. "I would. He's not just a creature to me. He's my friend. And I don't abandon my friends." The vote was close, but in the end, the Council decided to give Rex a chance. However, there were strict conditions. Rex would have to wear a monitoring device at all times. He would be restricted to certain areas. Any sign of aggression toward others would result in immediate termination. And Jake would be held personally responsible for Rex's actions. Jake agreed to everything. As they left the Council chambers, he felt Rex press against his side. the creature's deep purr vibrating through both of them. Admiral Cooper met them outside. "Congratulations, Lieutenant. You just made history, but I hope you understand what you've taken on." "I do, sir," Jake replied. Over the following months, Jake and Rex became famous throughout the coalition. They were living proof that understanding and compassion could bridge even the widest gaps between species. Scientists studied their bond, trying to understand how it worked. Other species that were considered too dangerous were given second looks, with researchers wondering if they too had been misjudged. Jake was assigned to a research and diplomatic vessel, where his primary duty was working with Rex and documenting their interactions. But he also became an unofficial ambassador, speaking to groups across the coalition about the importance of looking beyond fear and prejudice. Rex thrived in his new life. He learned dozens of commands, became gentle with the scientists who studied him, and even played with the children of crew members, always careful with his great strength. The monitoring device never recorded a single incident of aggression. At night, on whatever ship they were assigned to, Jake and Rex would find a quiet spot. Jake would sit and look out at the stars while Rex rested his massive head on Jake's lap, purring contentedly. "We did it, buddy," Jake would say. "We proved them wrong. We showed them that monsters are made, not born. And we showed them that humans have a gift for seeing the good in others, even when everyone else sees only danger." Rex would respond with his deep, rumbling purr, and Jake knew that the creature understood. They had saved each other in that dark arena cell. Two souls finding friendship in the most unlikely of places. And now they were changing the galaxy, one person at a time, proving that compassion was stronger than fear, and that the bonds between beings could transcend any difference. Their story spread far and wide, becoming a legend whispered across 1,000 worlds. The human who tamed the monster, the beast who learned to trust. Together they were proof that in a vast and often dark universe, there was still room for hope, for understanding, and for the kind of friendship that could overcome anything.